Tuesday, class of 1985 from Chelmsford High School, and today we're on location Where Are They Now at the Blue Bunny in Dedham with Peter and Paul Reynolds, class of 1978. Thank you so much for having us here. This place is beautiful. So,
thank you. Yeah.
When did you think you'd ever have a bookstore?
It wasn't in the original blueprints, but I think the books came first, the book publishing.
Yeah.
And we turned around in our hometown of now Dedham.
Yeah.
And we're surprised that there was no bookstore.
Okay.
And certainly no children's bookstore. So Peter had the crazy idea, as he normally does,
That's
and
my job.
sketching out the vision, and said, "Why don't we open up a bookstore?"
It's great to have you here
going
to
through
share.
the school system.
Yeah.
What was there a moment, a teacher, somebody that had an influence? And with the two of you, I know I should ask the question, did you ever switch classes? But was there a different teacher for both of you, you think, that had a different influence?
There were a lot, through the years, and I think we were blessed to have so many awesome teachers.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you go first because our most influential teachers are connected.
Right. It's funny because there's sort of, there's the Rat Pack in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and that group. But they were sort of like the Rat Pack of these creative teachers at Chelmsford High, and they all seemed to be friends, and they all sort of shared the same sort of creative ethos and mission. The way we connected to them, for me, was it was actually a math teacher in 7th grade who noticed that I love to draw. Most teachers would say, no, don't draw in class. You can do that on your own time. And Mr. Matson was the first teacher to look at me and think, okay, what can I do with that creative energy?
Really?
And he challenged me to look through the math textbook and see if I could find a concept that I could teach to another kid using my art and my storytelling. So, I went home and I created a comic book to teach math. And I went in and I showed Mr. Matson, and he took a look at it and he said, "Do you know what you've done?" And I thought, "Well, I made a comic book." And he said, "Well, it's a comic book, but it's also called a storyboard, and it's what a filmmaker uses to plan out a film. Wow. How would you like to make an animated film?" And I'm like, "Wow, that sounds awesome." I don't know how to make one. He's like, "I don't know how either."
I was going to say, did the math teacher know?
But to me, that's a sign of a great teacher or a caregiver. Is you have the idea, the brainstorm, and then you figure it out later, right?
Yes.
In fact, figure out with the student, and that's so he connected me to a teacher, Jim Morrow from the high school.
He was the media teacher.
Yeah, he was a media teacher, filmmaker, animator, super creative guy who also happened to have a super creative wife who was also a media teacher, and they changed our lives because Jim not only taught me how to make an animated film, which I did, I finished the film, but they became mentors for us throughout our high school experience, and for both of us, right?
Right, because I was having difficulty in physics class, and guidance counselor did a lovely thing and said, recognized that I was having real struggle there, and said, "Is there a better way that we could use that 1 hour block of time?"
Yeah.
And gave me some different options, and I chose to hang out with Jim Morrow's wife, Jean Morrow, who was at that point the media teacher.
Yeah.
And I started producing a weekly news show in the studio, and that began
called 6 Minutes.
It's called 6 Minutes.
It played during homeroom, so it had to be short. So it had a little stopwatch, and it would tick, 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 and so it was 6 minutes. So it was a kind of a using 60 Minutes as a model.
Very primitive equipment back then.
Yeah.
But it
was pretty. I was pretty impressed.
God bless you.
All the kids loved it.
But it was that began my trajectory of thinking, just forming my self-identity as I am a media maker.
Right.
And I went on to BC in communications and graduated and. But
then talk about how did you get on the newspaper then at the high school too? Because since you guys kind of changed the tune and changed the title of the newspaper.
That's right. At the time, it was called the Paper Lion, and most of the articles were about sports. It was sporting events, and go team. We love our teams.
But possibly there could be a broader spectrum.
Yeah,
So-
and then I think we were always interested in making sure that everything was inclusive, that everybody had a voice, right?
Right,
So,
yeah.
there were, we thought like, well, the theater department, drama needs, they need to be represented, and the student government, and also just issues that kids should be aware of.
Right.
And so we changed the name from Paper Lion to The Voice.
Yeah.
Because we wanted it to encourage kids to use their voice. Not only did we change the name, but we changed the approach of the paper. So we would do, it was always one big issue, like a topic. So we did weighted rank. We wanted kids to be aware that, people seem to be so obsessed with, it's like, oh, what rank are you? It's like,
Right.
and you got assigned this arbitrary number. So it's like, oh, I'm 25. Oh, I'm 437.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? When we got to high school and people were assigning numbers, like,
Yeah.
well, you're number one. So, and God bless the, valedictorians,
Of course.
Right.
but, does that mean that the person number one is going to be successful and the person at the end,
Paul couldn't
someone's
do
got
that.
to be
Paul
the last.
wasn't good in physics, like
I wasn't.
So that's
Right.
going to bring
Yeah.
that
Right.
And
that
I
one
think
down.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
sticking a label on kids and say,
Correct.
you're smart, you're the smartest,
Right.
you're dumb, you don't.
Right.
There are kids who are on that lower end that maybe didn't find success in traditional schooling.
Right.
And it may take them years to figure out, what, you're amazing. You're incredibly talented. You have a lot to give to the world. And you're a nice person, which is, that's one of our things where we always say, I would rather that you, be nicer than score perfectly on SATs.
I remember getting my SAT scores, and I'm not entirely sure what it was all about, but I
Yeah.
started hearing people on the school bus read out what their scores were, and I looked at mine, and I was devastated.
And
I
you
did
said,
not.
I'm not talking about
I did not
these.
test well. I really didn't test well, and I went home and I cried.
Yeah.
And I figured, like, oh, this must be an indicator that, my life is not going to go very well. Well, as it turns out, very successful. We have
So
Fablevision,
yeah,
a
how did you
multi-million-dollar
decide on
media
Boston College
company,
then?
and BC.
Because obviously that's where you are today, too, giving
Yeah.
back to your alum.
Actually, rewinding way back, early mentors.
Yeah.
Peter and I were scouts at Troop 77 in
Okay.
Chelmsford.
Yeah.
We went off to summer camp, age 11, and within about 24 hours, panic set in. Why are we here? Tears rolling
It was
down.
about 6 hours,
Yeah, maybe.
as the sun was setting.
Yeah.
And we're like, we got to stay here. And it's like, we want
And
it
so
out.
the call home, like, well, they'll come. Your parents will come tomorrow if that's
Yeah.
really what you want. But the scout chaplain came and hung out with us. His name was John Bonowitz, and recent convert from Judaism to Catholicism. He was the Catholic scout chaplain. We became fast friends,
Yeah.
and he really rescued us at that moment, and he became a Jesuit priest.
Okay.
Along the way, we're still in contact. He's now actually a monk.
Oh, really?
He's the abbot in the Amazon, right?
Brazil.
Oh, Brazil.
Yeah,
Well,
So did
the
he
forest.
have an
Yeah.
influence on you going to Boston College?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
his recommendation was, being a Jesuit
Yeah.
priest, like, you should check out BC.
Yeah.
And I was looking at, it seemed so exorbitant at the time. I think it was all of $5,000 for the year. But then
Yeah.
there was this wonderful state school called Fitchburg State
Yeah.
College, and it was $250 a semester. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, that sounds more affordable.
Right.
And I applied to BC, and I got waitlisted, and I wrote a thank you letter and decorated the entire letter, and they ended up calling back and saying, that letter, because I was thanking them, even though I didn't get in straight away.
Right.
I thanked them, and it was very decorative, and
Right.
used my design talent. And they called me up a few weeks later and said, you're in. So that's
it.
we both started at Fitchburg State. I
Oh, okay.
transferred to BC.
Yep.
Pete transferred out to Mass Art.
To Mass Art.
So you guys were going to go to Fitchburg State together?
We
actually
did. So we did.
So
So we did the
shortly.
first year we started together, and then we separated.
So
And
second year I went to BC.
So we spent
Okay.
this. We spent a couple of years in college, in the first years of working away from each other, and we kind of got
Right.
So where did you go after Boston College?
after BC.
Yeah. You guys didn't work together.
That's right. So I got a job at a place called Television Productions and Services.
Okay.
And
TPS.
TPS, right?
And I got a job at TSP, Tom Snyder Productions,
Yeah.
a teacher who was starting a software company, educational software
And they
company
were
in
both in
Cambridge.
Mass?
They're both,
Yeah.
Yeah.
One was in Watertown, one was in Cambridge.
Yeah.
So we were one town apart working.
Right. And
so
then eventually TSP moved even closer, so we were both in Watertown.
That's right.
1 mile away.
And there was the Arsenal Mall between us, and
Right.
we would
There was
meet
a-
at Taco Bell,
Awesome Taco Bell.
right?
Yeah.
And we would
Meet for lunch.
Yep.
And we would compare notes about what we were doing. So Peter was
Okay.
using media, storytelling, and technology with kids.
Yep.
I was using media, storytelling, and technology with adults to help do educational media for corporate and institutional
Yeah.
clients. And then the more we compared notes, the more we realized
It's-
universal truths of learning.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
learning, you never stop learning.
Correct.
And the adults actually needed the learning to be a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
And for kids, it needed to be more challenging and more interesting. And so there were kind of things that I was learning from Paul and Paul was learning from me. And we're like, do you know what? It's all the same thing. And so we found out that we just love learning.
Right.
And one of the best learning tools is story. And we both were big believers in story.
Right.
And then I started my own company, Fable Vision.
Okay.
And
And at this
actually-
point, I had been hired away by a documentary filmmaker, and we started a company called Cosmic Blender. So we're
Okay.
doing corporate learning and marketing
Yep.
video production.
Yeah.
And
like Sheraton and Royal Caribbean.
oh yeah,
and,
fun,
right?
easy to make corporate training interesting because at the
Yes.
time it was really, really boring. So,
Correct.
and we
Yeah.
used, and then Peter.
I incubated my company at his studio.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah.
they let me have an office, and then I had
Fable Vision. It was up on the door, and I think you made a hat embroidered one
I
day, and
did.
like this is the company,
Yeah.
Fable Vision.
And I gathered a couple of creative people together, and then we went from one room to 2 rooms, and then 2 rooms moved upstairs to a big studio
Bigger.
space.
Yep.
And then we got too big for that, and then we moved downtown. So we're at actually
And we
21.
spun Fable Vision out as his own separate LLC, and then
Okay.
Yeah.
incorporated.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, when Fable Vision really was taking off, Pete turned to me and like, "I need your help.
Yeah.
I can't do this by myself." So then I had to tell my business partner, "I'm leaving you for my twin brother," and not because I didn't love Cosmic Blender, because it's an awesome
Right.
company and awesome people, and but joining forces with
Yeah.
Peter
With
was
Pete,
and,
yeah.
and focusing on kids and families
Right.
was more
Yeah.
what brought me more joy.
Which ironically, when we got too big, we were looking for spaces. So our corporate real estate guy was taking us around to office parks around the 128 belt.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. I'm looking for something interesting. And he finally showed us a piece of property that was very interesting. It was the top floor of the Boston Children's Museum.
Oh, is
Yeah.
that
Yeah, overlooking the harbor and the
Yeah.
Tea Party ship and Boston, beautiful view. And the strange thing was I had a dream about moving into that space,
Yeah.
not knowing that the space was even available. I remember calling
That's
you
right.
up on, I had this dream that Fablevision moved into the Boston Children's Museum.
I'm like, "Pete, I know that there's no way we're going to be in the Children's Museum. We worked with them for years. They have a lot of difficulty with their
But
space."
didn't you have the flashback to your mom who just said, keep asking?
well, there you go. Right, yeah, that's right. Very
Keep
very
a-
good,
right?
Heather. That's
Keep asking and keep dreaming and,
Yep.
and keep doing. Do your work and
Right.
good things will happen.
Right.
We are extremely optimistic people, and I
Yeah.
think our stories try to encourage people to look at the glass as not only half full, but that there's this potential to fill it up.
So when
Right.
you're building the company, though, it was writing and illustrating always there, or from
Yeah.
your books, or
Yeah, I'm writing and drawing every single day,
Yeah.
and I have notebooks and journals, and I wrote
Right.
a story called The North Star, which is about sort of finding your path, your own unique path in
Yep.
this crazy swamp of life. And when Paul read it, he's like, "Oh, this is, this sort of sums up everything we believe in."
Right.
And so, as a company, we decided to publish the book.
Okay.
as a way to explain our philosophy.
Yep.
So instead of printing T-shirts or having a mission statement, we had a mission book.
Right.
And so the North Star became our mission book. And we sold hundreds and then thousands, and we had an entrepreneur from Texas who bought 5,000 copies, right?
Right.
And he's like, I love this so much, I'm going to buy 5,000 copies and just give them out to kids in need in Boston. Which that money, so he paid for this additional printing, and we used the additional money to print more. And then eventually we said, okay, are we a publisher or are we a media producer? We were like, let's stick to media production.
Right.
Candlewick Press came along and said, we'd love to publish your work. We love your style, your sensibilities. And they said, they took me out to lunch, and we had this story that came across our desk. It's by Megan McDonald, and it's called Judy Moody Was in a Mood, not a good mood, a bad mood. If you like the story, we'd like you to illustrate it. So I said yes, not knowing that there'd be like 25 books in this series and a movie.
Right.
But that started this chain reaction and this relationship with Candlewick, and they're like, we love your sensibilities and your mission. And I told them about these 3 stories I called the Create Trilogy, so the Dot, Ish, and Sky Color. And they said, we love them all, we'll publish all of them. And that got me into doing publishing. So Fablevision was going along, my book career started going along alongside it.
Yeah.
But they're very much connected, because all the messages in my books and now our books, because we are now collaborators.
But there's some thing, I mean, we call it Twinergy.
Thing though is a big thing for you guys.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're
learning,
it's like
education.
To me, teaching is a give.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You're giving something as a teacher, right?
Absolutely. It's right. You've learned something and learning is not true learning and teaching is self. You've learned something, it's like, but now you can give it back to somebody else, right? And pass that torch on, because we're not going to be here forever, right? So you have to give that wisdom and those gifts and encouragement to the next generation.
I got that call 28 years ago from BC.
Yeah.
Saying, we'd love you to come back and teach.
Yeah.
And I had no children at the time, just married. And I said sure. And it began a really wonderful journey. And I love teaching broadcast writing, video production, video editing. I start off the semester and end the semester with the Reynolds, giving them the Reynolds Lifetime Guardian Angel Guarantee. And I say, you're not just taking a course with me, you've intersected with my life. Right. And I'm going to be here for as long as I breathe my last breath, and be here to help you out, even if it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So.
That's awesome.
It reminded me of just thinking about one of my first experiences in teaching. It was actually counseling. A friend of mine, Carolyn Weintraub, Chelmsford High graduate. She said, she's like, I'm volunteering at Camp Paul, a camp for special needs kids, and it was hosted on a farm along Mill River, not far from our house. And she's like, come on down, you should check it out. So I jumped on my bike, I went down to see Carolyn, and within 20 minutes they wrote me in. They're like, we need you. And they gave me that on the spot. This wouldn't happen today, but on the spot they gave me 6 kids to take care of, and I became a counselor. And that was like the crash course in understanding that every child is different. Because I was 3 days in and I realized that one of my little kids, I could still picture her today, she was deaf. I didn't know that. They forgot to tell me that she was deaf. So what I was saying, then I realized, like, for her, I'm going to have to tailor what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. And I also had kids, and we were along a river, and I remember, one of these kids wandering off to the river, and I have to corral them back in, which is kind of a metaphor for great teaching. You have to understand every single kid. Are they listening? Where are they at? Are they wandering off? How do I find them? How do I bring them back in? And so for me, that was very formational. And I loved counseling, and I did counseling for maybe 6 summers. And I decided I would be a teacher. And then a funny thing happened. My hand could not stop drawing, and
That drawing.
and then somebody, actually Children High School, paid me. They said there was a boring Spanish textbook with no illustrations, and apparently the kids were like falling asleep in class. So they said, Peter, could you illustrate this book?
Wow, I forgot this.
So, and they paid me $5 an illustration to make these illustrations, very detailed illustrations of the story of this family in Spain, and
we have to track
these
that
wacky adventures. And they made overhead transparencies, so as the kids were reading the book in class, they would see my drawings big on the screen.
Wow.
And not only was it,
Did I learn from your
yeah,
drawings?
you might have,
You might
but
have.
they had.
Isn't
I mean,
funny?
there were
I don't
like
remember.
22 chapters, so 5
Wow.
drawings, 5 to 7 drawings per chapter. So it was really my first big illustration gig. I'm a teacher, but my classroom, instead of 30 kids,
Right.
I have millions of kids now because my stories and our
Around-
stories,
around the world.
Right.
right? And
I mean, International Dot Day is now, we just went over
Yeah.
13 million
Talk more about International Dot Day.
teachers
I mean, that's
and
unbelievable.
librarians and kids. Yeah.
well, the book The Dot is about creativity and about this kid who says she can't draw, and a teacher who thinks differently says, just make a mark, see where it takes you. Well, she makes this one mark, and it unleashes her creativity because her teacher frames the dot, and she's like, I could make a better dot than that, and that begins her journey, and her creativity starts to flow. Teachers have embraced the book in school, not only to teach art, but to teach mindfulness and persistence and bravery.
Right.
And one particular teacher, Terry Shea in Iowa, became friends with me, and he loved the book. And he's like, I wish we had more creativity in schools. Wouldn't it be great if we had a sanctioned holiday to celebrate creativity? So we dreamed up this concept of Dot Day, and it started out just as his class.
Yeah.
And they celebrated, they made dots, and they signed them, and they made frames, and they had a gallery, and they had dot food and dot clothes. And his teacher friends saw it on Facebook and said, oh my gosh, what a great idea. Are you going to do it again next year? Because it's always September 15th-ish, we
It's
say.
the publishing date of the book.
Yeah, so this book came out September 15th, 2003. So they did it again the next year with a couple of, maybe, a dozen other classes.
Yeah.
The next year, hundreds joined, and then the next year, thousands, and then...
Now,
We-
do
we
they
heard-
reach out to
yeah.
you to talk about it?
Oh
or-
yeah,
yeah,
he reached
yeah.
out, and he, eventually he was saying, I'm a teacher, I'm trying to teach, and I've got all these people
Right.
wanting to sign up, and I don't...
Right.
Signing up on his little Google form on the school website.
Yeah.
So we said, so our nonprofit, the Reynolds Center for
Yes.
Teaching, Learning, and Creativity, adopted the program, and we set up the first website, well, the website,
Yeah.
the.club.org.
The.club.org.
Much easier way to sign up.
Yeah.
You'll sign up form and resources and posters. Everything's free on the site.
Yeah.
That year, it jumped from 17,500 participating to 850,000
850.
in 50 countries.
Wow.
It just jumped the gate.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done so many things in our life, and little events, bigger events,
Yeah.
and then this happened. And in a connected universe with, the internet is our friend.
Yeah.
The word spread, and it's kept growing through.
So
the
we
year.
had, this past year, we had 181 countries participating,
Wow.
Right, right.
and we've reached over
13,400,000.
kids. Yeah.
So who knows what next year will be?
Right.
But
Yeah. But
is-
So do they
It's-
keep ordering the books like all these schools and the
Oh yeah,
teachers
the
and-
books.
and there's an
and-
animated film version.
Okay.
And there's a play that's been traveling around, a
Really?
musical that's
Yeah.
part of an ensemble cast and 4 different stories. Who
Right.
knows
So-
what's ahead for the Reynolds brothers? Actually film. I would love to do something big, longer form.
Yeah.
I'd love to do a holiday, holiday special.
Right.
And I'd love to try my hand at film musicals. And there's so many ways to tell stories, but I mean the most important thing is that we do tell our stories.
Correct.
And
Right.
our big message is that everybody who's listening tell their story,
Right.
even if it's just around the dinner table. Just keep telling those stories. Put the phones down.
Right.
Turn off the TV. Cook together.
Right.
Don't do the drive-through. Cook together. Make it an experience.
Yeah.
And those experiences are the things that are most important. Things don't matter. Money doesn't matter. experiences and memories are the things that matter. And we want to encourage people to connect and talk to each other and share, whether it's words or your art, your music, create, make things. And share and change the world, make it a better place.
It's so wonderful to come here. I love this bookstore.
Oh, thank you.
And by the way, you can beat the traffic. I mean, people are always worried about the traffic, but that's all right. You can get here.
Yeah.
So on behalf of everybody, the Reynolds brothers, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you come back to another show. Thank you.